got a lot of questions and concerns. Anything that we've covered so far in the series that people don't feel they've had time to explore yet, feelings that you have, thoughts. We have a number of people who want to contribute ideas or responses. And there'll be 4 faculty members that are going to sit up here. We need one more chair, don't we? And field your questions and also provoke a conversation themselves in terms of the idea. Yes, right. Robert Harris here has suggested that Bernard Offen, who is here today, 2 weeks ago on the panel that he was on, he didn't have time to talk about the responses that he had in Poland. He's been spending. You might want to talk.
But quite a bit also an unconscious anti-Semitism that comes from the liturgy of the Catholic Church that is still, it's within the language of the Polish people itself. Since Poland is about 95% Catholic, I found some people who were interested in what I was doing. What I'm doing is I was teaching in Poland, and I will be doing so again this year at the university there. It's a real old university, and leading groups of people through the Krakow ghetto, what used to be the ghetto where I was incarcerated, and then some of the camps and also Auschwitz. So I lead groups to those places, and that is my form of teaching. These people that I stayed with, it was amazing that at times they were arguing with me, or arguing with them because I said what you said is anti-Semitic in conversation. And what they argued was that it was not. And I had an opportunity and realized that I could either argue with them in that moment and try and win the argument, and I realized I could convince them in that moment that the information I had didn't match up with theirs. So I let that go and focused in on things that we were in agreement about, and it went well for the most part, except for those little things. So what I was realizing that they're unconscious about many of the things that they say. I'm not saying that anti-Semitism does not exist in Poland, but it's someone made the remark that in Poland, the anti-Semitism comes with a mother's milk. And I'm afraid that to a great extent that they are right. But people just not aware. Where I didn't find any education in the public schools, anything about the Holocaust that involved about the Jews. It was, to a great extent, it's about the Poles suffer. Jews are just mentioned in passing. There's some more acknowledgement now about how many Jews were murdered and in what camps and all of that. But throughout the years under the communist regime, there were different educational ministers, and they printed different books denying what happened to Jews, essentially. And we were made Poles after the war. We were not dirty Jews. We were Poles. Before that, we were not Poles. before the war. We were just dirty Jews. So I went back to this setting, and I met quite a number of people at the university level that were interested in teaching about the period of the Holocaust. And quite a number of the teachers that were involved in this intensive month-long course were on the leading edge of Polish society in as far as teaching about the Holocaust, acknowledging the responsibility of the Polish people and what happened, and whether there was aid or there was not aid, or the collaboration of some Poles. And what I also realized that some of these teachers who are on the leading edge of the intelligentsia is that some of them are still anti in actuality in the way in which they teach. It was a great healing for me to go back to Poland to confront my past, to go actually into the places in the camps I was in the ghetto, and to do something with that. I realized that I was very, very angry when I first went over there, but then I also realized that many are also victims. And one of the things I wanted to do was to find a family that sheltered me for one night when I escaped from one of the camps. And towards the end of the 3 months I was there, I went on the radio and television, and someone called in. It turned out to be their daughter. The people are no longer alive, but their daughter is, and much chance to talk with them. But I will be returning this summer again, so I will be in communication more with these people and try to help them, because indeed they risk their lives. If any Jew was caught in their home, a whole family would have been shot. So you need to take that into consideration also. And if anyone is interested in a flyer in regards to Poland that exists there right now, if you've been reading the papers about what's happening in Eastern Europe, then it very, very much is existing also in Poland. Many factories shut down because they're inefficient, coal burning, great deal of pollution there. The whole system of government and politics has changed. Just imagine that all of those things were happening right here in this country, and it would be great turmoil here in this country. So that's the place I'll be going back to, and see how I can continue to teach and talk about some of the issues also that exist there for me. Okay. Let me go and sit down over here now.
Right.
Yeah.
Could there not also be a bit of a class differentiation involved? For instance, if you read the biography, I think I got the right pianist of Rubinstein, he speaks of himself as a Pole, and he seemed to have enjoyed the interfacing, as they say, with the Polish society. Now, since he is well known and accomplished, wears clean shirts and so on, there maybe, is it possible that there's a special section for Jews that are sort of arrived, and they are not as despised as the poor ones?
That's always true, I think, not only with Jews,
Any kind of.
Yeah, we like you, whoever the you is, but not the others. You're okay, that kind of thing. Nothing.
Can you give an example of a unconscious anti-Semitic remark, let's say, that you would recognize?
Rubinstein is Russian, not Polish.
Well, let me think of one. Okay, I was talking specifically about the Auschwitz camp, and what that was for Jews. And a lot of Polish people were in denial as to what Auschwitz was for Jews. It was Polish citizens. You know. Well, I believe some of them might really still believe it because that's what they learned in school. That was in their books, you know, and it's very hard to change someone's mind. But some of the people I talked to knew better because it's being written about in the present.
Test it.
Hello. It works. Yes.
You said that the Catholic Church in Poland promotes, or through its liturgy, condones anti-Semitism. That's, although I'm not surprised.
Very, very few churches, so it's like that. Also, I had an opportunity to speak with some priests, and they seem to be arguing always from their liturgy. So, in other words, what the liturgy says, and that's the truth, and what happened there is still denied. The truth for them is their liturgy, regardless of what happened during the war.
What is liturgy?
Well, dogma of Jews as the Christ killers. And for instance, I was with a group of students. We were touring Poland, visiting many cemeteries, Jewish cemeteries. What remains of them is very little. Most of the stones were carted off and used for road building and other construction. They're trying to restore a few cemeteries, but most of them are just destroyed.
Did that happen in other cemeteries as well?
You mean in other countries?
In other older cemeteries?
All-
That's pretty common even in history.
All of the Jewish cemeteries were still destroyed, except I know one in Krakow, and that's because of a freak. It was not actually the whole cemetery behind the synagogue was covered over before World War I, a big mound, and they didn't know that stones existed that are. And we came to this one beautiful church. I forgot. I think it was it's called Lancut, Lancut. Lancut is a beautiful, beautiful old church. Walked into it. It was just magnificent. The statuary, the icons, the paintings, very, very big. Just stole my eyes just looking around at all of the icons and paintings. And then I started walking and looking at the paintings, the Stations of the Cross. 12 of them. Jesus in these paintings, larger than life on the cross. Still, in many places, looks as if he's still bleeding. In Polish, there was a inset card typed about that Jesus was nailed to the cross with nails, but they were not just nails, they were big, fat nails. I mean, that's the description of suffering, the minutiae and detail. And about hatred of Jews was contained in every one of the 12 in these little cards beneath it. That we Jews crucified Jesus, and that's how it continues.
I find that real hard to believe.
I know. So did I.
Refer him to Shoah, blood linesman. There are multiple examples of.
Would you why don't you?
I just wanted to refer you to the film Shoah. Have you seen it? Or at least part of it, because Claude Lanzmann goes back into the Polish villages of Poland and shows the inherent and endemic anti-Semitism in people's thinking and feeling. People who moved into Jewish houses immediately as soon as the people were deported. And when you go back and ask them, well, whose house was this? Oh, there were some people here. Well, whose house was it? Oh, we don't remember. Well, whose house was it? Well, there were some Jewish people here. Well, was this a Jewish house? Oh, well, I don't know. This idea that they could take over the property and take over the towns, and the Jewish people could be gone, and it was no loss to them. And to me, that film is one of the best examples of the ideas that they protect themselves with psychologically to allow them to have done the things that they did. Also, if anybody follows the current Archbishop, Joseph Klimp, who has said many blatant anti-Semitic comments in public in Poland and has been called national press over and over to apologize. He does not apologize, but he'll often say some kind of indirect, well, maybe I'll say it differently kind of statement. Well, if I can't say it outright, I'll say it indirectly, because he's very anti-Semitic, and he's one of the top Catholic leaders of Poland and continues to be as anti-Semitic as he ever was, evidently. Okay.
Why we are here is a very specific reason. There is not always very much time for questions and answers. And I'm sure that many of you somehow feel that something is missing, that you'd like to get some answers, things which you may have thought about for quite a while. And that's why we are sitting here trying to answer those questions which have not been asked as yet. Also engage you in a dialogue, because obviously we don't have all the answers, as you well know. But what we are trying to do is just engage and enter into a dialogue with you, so that you don't, we just feed you with some sort of material and knowledge which is not properly digested. And I think the best way to deal with that is just to talk about it and see what needs to be discussed in greater depth and expand upon. So those of us who are here, who are all the representatives of the various groups, not all, but 4 of us here, we'll try our best to respond to your needs, intellectual, academic, and emotional needs. Yes?
I'd like to read a statement that I've written on this course.
Might be better if you use the microphone here, John.
It follows what Mr. Offin said, and the young woman whose name I do not. I think the remarks of those 2 people speak directly to the failings of this course. Since today is designated for general discussion, and the topic is Learned and Unlearned Lessons of the Holocaust, the following comments on my personal evaluation of the course are appropriate. Let me begin by stating I speak as a Jew, an American, and a retired academic. There is a tendency for us to use common words without understanding the precise meaning of things. I count myself amongst that group. Therefore, I now offer the dictionary meaning of the word Holocaust. Holocaust, from the Greek holocaustos, means whole, completely incinerated, ashes borne on the wind. No trace, nada. Never was, never is, never will be. Now to the course director. First, to begin on a positive note, the university and the faculty are to be commended for developing and offering this course not only to the students but to the community at large. The fact that it is an interdisciplinary course shows the depth of understanding on the part of the faculty, for no facet of life was untouched by the Holocaust. With the passage of time, the survivors grow fewer, the memories become dimmer, and the Holocaust becomes just another topic. Sonoma State, by offering this course, will prevent the memory of the Holocaust from becoming just another banal topic in a 3-credit course. Second, I grant that it is difficult to bring academic detachment and objectivity to such an emotionally charged subject as the Holocaust. I think in large measure you have done so. However, bordering on stupidity in a member of the faculty. Third, I will not attend the remaining lectures because I truly believe that the topics chosen trivialize and demean the terror of the Holocaust. If you insist upon equating other horrors with the Holocaust, at least find that which are valid. The only other people who can lay to a Holocaust are the Armenians. In the first quarter of this century, the Turkish government officially tried to exterminate them. I recommend that you read Franz Verbel's The 40 Days of Musa Dagh, which deals with the subject. It is a beginning. The Holocaust is unique. It was the official policy of a democratically elected government to exterminate a whole people. Every society, without exception, not only acquiesced, but positively joined in depriving the Jews of life, property, liberty, and their dignity as human beings. Do not trivialize the complete failure of a people to act as human beings by dragging in inappropriate topics and attempting to equate them with the Holocaust. Fourth, up to this point, the main failure of this course, in the most bizarre, in a running act of all time, has placed these foreign workers in camps for their own protection. Deja vu. If you have difficulty believing this, be aware that Mr. Helmut Kohl made an official state visit to the Nazi Waldheim within the last few weeks, the first head of state to do so in Waldheim's reign. Evidently, with only a very few exceptions, the Germans have not changed. They are still the beasts of the concentration camps. If we are not ever vigilant, the Holocaust will happen again.
Anyone want to respond?
Yeah.
Bill?
One of the main questions that we try to address in this lecture series is how to prevent future genocides. Now, the question of comparing the Jewish Holocaust of World War II to other genocides and to social movements that seem to be or could be moving towards genocide has come up in the past in this series and an item of considerable discussion in Holocaust studies in general. And there is an attitude, which was just expressed, that the Jewish Holocaust, since it was unique, should not be denigrated or somehow devalued or dishonored by bringing it into connection with other Holocausts, or large or small. It seems to me that this attitude blocks us from learning a lot of lessons. In making reference to ways in which tendencies start to grow in societies that may lead to exclusionary policies which in their extreme form are, become genocide. I think that quite the opposite of denigrate, not as much as I will, I mean, I haven't read as much about the Holocaust or seen as many presentations or visited as many sites as I should, but I read about it all the time, in German sources primarily, because there is so much that is written about it now in Germany, so much being talked about in Germany, as opposed to the way that it gets talked about in, or doesn't more often than not get talked about in other places of the United States. And the question on my mind is always, how do we keep this kind of, this terrible thing from happening again? And it's not an easy question to answer, because it's so easy to fall into the trap, I think it's a trap, of looking at every little thing that you don't like that's going on in your society and saying, see, now we've got to put a stop to this, because if we don't, it'll lead to something else, which will lead to something else, which will lead to genocide. If we're going to prevent future Holocausts, just look at what's going on right now in the state of California with the budget. The governor is cutting all of the money from education. And this is a step towards a Holocaust. And I thought to myself, well, that's kind of far-fetched. It is kind of far-fetched, but on the other hand, I can see what she's getting at. But the question is, you know, how can we do a responsible job as academicians identifying the social pieces of the mosaic, you know, the little pieces that ultimately will lead to the complete mosaic of a new Holocaust. If you pick out any single one of them, people say you're exaggerating, you're bringing up far-fetched examples, you are devaluing the experience of the Jews who lived through, and especially those who died in, the Jewish Holocaust, will be allowed to perpetrate this kind of atrocity. Now, the thing that I brought up about the question of the Jews being the chosen people, or seeing themselves as the chosen, you know, the chosen people doctrine, which has been part of Judaism for thousands of years, wasn't my idea. It was brought up by a German Jewish philosopher, Ernst Tugendhat, in an article that he wrote last year in Die Zeit about the Gulf War. And he was trying to do was simply broach the question. And then I do the same thing. I broach it as a question. Is there anything, I mean, I have nothing against, far from it, the idea that many Jews have that they are a chosen people. But I would also point out that it is a matter of debate within Judaism itself. Are we the chosen people or are we not? Where do we get by this kind of, by adopting this kind of a doctrine or believing in it? This is the question that Tugendhat was asking. And the question that the framework within which I posed it 2 weeks ago was, how can we maintain pride in ourselves as individuals and as particular groups within society, looking at it from the Jewish point of view, how can we maintain our belief that we are something really special, call us the chosen people if you want, but how can we maintain the belief in our specialness at the same time as we are building bridges, people who are not like us? That's the question. Can people who think of themselves as being somehow super special, the chosen people, the one and only chosen people, if that's the mindset, then how does one go from that mindset towards building the bridges that Professor Yager talked about to people of other persuasions with other views, so that exclusionism and hatred will not grow? I put it to you as celebrating it. That's the key. It's not an answer, it's a challenge. That's how I ended my remarks. I wasn't trying to say that the Jews were responsible for bringing the Holocaust on themselves because they thought they were the chosen people. Please. You know. I have a lot more sensitivity towards Jews and a lot more sympathy for Jews than that interpretation would lead anyone to believe. What I'm doing is, you know, how do we feel special about ourselves and our group, and at the same time allow other people that same right, so that we share our specialness, we share our diversity, and rejoice in each other's diversity. That's the way I think, that's one of the keys, it seems to me, to preventing future Holocausts. Let's see, this lady here, and then Carol.
There's a great misinterpretation of the term the chosen people. The Jews were chosen to show responsibility. You've heard of the light of the world. In other words, to be the best that they could be. Not because they were better than other people, but to try to be moral and so on and so on. And it has been misinterpreted over the centuries and used against them. And that's why it's so offensive.
And that's why I said ignorance bordering on stupidity. You are a member of the faculty, you are not a member of the public.
I would like to point out, and I'm going to burst in here, that this session is really for the many, many students in this class who've never had a chance to speak once in this whole series. because other people dominate. And I think these ideas are important, and it's an important dialogue, but I would like to bring that out.
I'm really glad you said that, because somebody told me after I spoke up that I should keep quiet because the classes are for students. And I've kept quiet, and I'm waiting to hear. I'm really distressed that I'm not getting any feedback from the students about something that is so emotionally charged.
Let's be quiet for 30 seconds and see if someone else will speak.
Could I just point out, if you want the microphone, please come and take it.
This is given in much respect, and hopefully in a light of understanding. I am a German. I am not a Jew. I'm a Catholic. My God is a Jew. I have learned so much. I have had what I consider my Holocaust. Don't take it away from me. It might not have been yours, but it was mine. Okay. This gentleman here, I'm sorry I do not know his name. I'm sorry, I apologize, I should know you. You're my brother. Led me to a greater understanding of what my church has done to hurt. And I went to him and I asked for forgiveness. That's learning, ma'am.
Not that far.
I'm usually pretty good at it, but this time I'm not. Okay. And this is what I wrote to my English professor and just handed it over to my professor here. It says, "Forgive us, Father. A simple favor to ask. Hell no, you gotta go. How could I ever face my people that paid good money for you, Robert, to share your last supper on death row? Gather cling to one another in an attempt to lessen the pain that formed our bond from this." I looked at the imprint of the cross etched on my palm. Jesus did not look up. I wondered if he was in the depth of despair. Was he remembering things of the past? Were thoughts running through his mind that mocked or even worsened and affirmed his being, the very question as to why and purpose of his being? I left him there in the seat to process another Gethsemane, another Golgotha, and I began to process mine. It was 6-something in the morning. The clock vomited green. Auschwitz ghosts groaned. And that's my tribute to my Jewish friends. And I'm sorry for the pain that's been caused by us. But one thing, ma'am, I do know, anger will not get it there. Forgiveness will. Thank you very much.
Make it short.
Try and be as short as I can.
That's one.
In the
She's a student.
words of James MacDonald, who retired as the High Commissioner for Refugees in 1936, his words come to mind: "I can't remain silent." And since this young lady talked, I'm addressing my remarks to you. And one other reason I can make these remarks, and I feel very confident, because there is a witness, an eyewitness who was there in this room, and he can give me what for if I make a mistake. Hitler waged war against the Protestant church and against the church, as sure as he waged war against anybody. From 1938 to the end of the war, 2,700 Christian clergymen were incarcerated in Dachau. At least 1,500 of them were Polish priests, Bernard. This is another side for you. At least 1,500 were Polish priests. They were the ones who most. One of them, I think he was Polish anyway, one of the priests died hanging up upside down for 10 days. Unspeakable brutality. So, there is always an other side. The witness who was there, his picture is in the book, and that is our own professor, Dr. Steiner. So, when you become a student of this, to look at all sides,
you just cannot erase it. I mean, we know 6 million Jews died in the concentration camps, but there were 6 million others. Who were these others? What else was going on? And the students in this room, this is what we have to learn and study and know. Thank you.
Mike,
I'd like to say.
could we just identify 3 people, this and this lady back here? And then,
Yes.
if you need the mic, please take.
I'm not as brave as my compatriots here. What I'd like to say is that one of the problems with this series is that the outside community doesn't have the benefit of having to put in, they don't have the benefit of having to read the books that are involved. I got really mad with this because homosexuals in the Holocaust and the 10 to 15,000 that died wasn't being mentioned. And it wasn't that Professor Beard and I talked it out through my papers, through the papers that I presented. And we brought it up in class too. But there's other ways around this.
Brought to concentration camps. Now there is one important thing which we need to distinguish, that it was the gypsies and some Slavs and the Jews who were exterminated. Homosexuals were sent to concentration camps and not to destruction camps, which is not to say that they didn't die there. Now when I was in Dachau, I met a number of very interesting, highly stimulating were there for that very reason, and they had a paragraph which they gave it and justified it. Even some SS people, for example, were sent to concentration camps because they were homosexuals. They also were excluded from their ranks and punished. Some of them were even shot. So we need to distinguish between who was sent there for what reason. And the interesting thing is that INS does not know any borders, no limits. And there was a categorization as to who was supposed to die and who was supposed to be punished, because not all people were sent to concentration camps were dying in concentration camps, because even in 1945, one of my friends and neighbors on the bunk was a person from Estonia, and he was released during the last days, and he just was just beside himself with joy that he would be released. And so yes, there are a number of people like political inmates, some of the priests, some of the other individuals who were not gypsies, Jews, or some commissars, Russian Jewish commissars, who were sent to die in these camps. And that's why we need to distinguish very carefully between ghettos, or to begin with concentration camps, ghettos, destruction camps, and slave labor camps. And they all had different functions, except these people died like flies, because there was no vested interest for them to survive. They were just simply used for a very specific purpose. Now, the interesting part is that as far as homosexuals concerned, that most of the homosexuals who were sent to the camps were Germans and not other nationalities, which is kind of interesting. And one of my friends in Dachau was a prince, a German prince who was sent there because he was homosexual. He was a overt homosexual, and that could not be tolerated. So that much to it is too bad that we can't do justice to all the people who were sent to camps. But I think we need to distinguish between the various categories, and there was a chance to survive, or the chance to survive was better for some than for others. But I'm glad you brought it up.
There's a lady back there.
Yes.
I know that I'm not the only one in this class class who feels this way, but I'm Catholic, and I feel like some of the presentations or the things have been like a bashing of Catholics. And back in the 40s it's happening, I would have been embarrassed to be a Catholic person of the teachings that they were doing. But now it has changed. And I feel that it's like a front against me, that because of the teachings of something, I'm only 21, and when I was brought up after Vatican II, after all the major changes in the Catholic Church happened, after, I'm being brought up in the time when new church, they don't have a crucifix in the church, it's just a cross. It doesn't have a Jesus with blood coming all over him. It isn't a Jewish bashing. Jesus was Jewish. I celebrate Passover because that's part of my Jewish heritage. And I feel like it's somewhat of a front. And to understand, I know it's not done intentionally, but I think in the future that we need to be aware of the different diversity of population of religion in this room, and need to be aware of what we say, because it can be taken wrong, and I'm sure I probably have taken it wrong.
I appreciate your sentiments. There's always a problem if we generalize. And for example, in my travels I found that Catholics are very different in different countries. And there are very different attitudes, and some are more and some are less tolerant, some are more and some are very little anti-Semitic. And if I just can remind of, particularly those of you Catholics, Pope John. Pope John went out of his way, went to Turkey to save Jewish children and to see to it that a boat would actually come and pick them up. And he had to deal with Nazi adversaries and saved a lot of Jews that way. Some of these stories are not known, but yes, there are very many Catholic priests, very dedicated, and some were very close friends of Dachau, who did nothing else but saved people's lives and interfered at their own risk to lose their own life. So we simply cannot generalize. The fact is that in certain countries Catholicism is very much colored by the type of prejudice which prevails in that given in any organization, may it be Catholic, Jewish, or Protestant, or whatever, who will represent that particular movement in a way which will not be conducive to brotherhood or sisterhood, if you will. And recognizing that, we just really need to become more tolerant. We need to develop tolerance of ambiguous, Else Frankel, Brunswick said in the authoritarian personality, a book which came out in the 50s. The tolerance of ambiguity is something which we don't see. We don't see tolerance also when we see the gassing of Harris and all these sort of things which come up in particularly these few days. We've had quite a bit of absurd notions and intolerance where people just are interested in retribution and not tolerance and restitution. And I see that with my own students too, who just simply don't relate to some of these things at all, simply because they've been brought up in a society which stresses retribution. And so they don't see the trees for the woods, and at times I get very with that. But then I am reminded of the fact that I too need to be tolerant, even if I have a hard time tolerating people's views which are kind of unhedged and not dreadfully mature. But I think we should never generalize, we should not stereotype, and we should not be prejudiced. And that's very easy, but more difficult to act upon.
this gentleman had a question.
I'm a student, and I am not Catholic, and I'm not Jewish, and I have no ties to anybody that was ever involved in the Holocaust. The closest I came to World War II was my father, who served in the Pacific, and he was on Midway Island after the island had been taken. I'm here because I wanted to learn more about the whys that caused these things to happen. Because I think that in order for us to grow, we need to know more about that. I don't feel comfortable with the instructors apologizing for what's been said, and that's what I feel happened. I feel that the input that you have provided us with has been enlightening and can be taken in many different ways. I came here to learn and to learn about the Holocaust, and I'm leaving here learning. And I feel like this lecture series has been successful because unless I know about me, I can't do anything about anything else. I can never feel what a survivor feels. I can never feel the pain. I can never feel the anguish because I was not there. It's never touched my life directly, ever. But I need to know. I don't want this to ever happen again. I served in Vietnam in 1965 when it first started. And at the lecture we had at the Commons, I made the comment, I realized that under certain circumstances, we can all do terrible things and learn to live with them. And I saw myself in a different light after that. I appreciated that. I had difficulty dealing with that. But I'm growing from that. I know that in Vietnam there were people known as the Montagnard people that no longer exist. They were eliminated by the Vietnamese, and that was their intent. They annihilated it, period. That's what they wanted to do because they were the friends of the Americans. And that happened. And that is genocide. And that is a Holocaust. And it's happening all over the world all the time. We just don't hear about it because it's not as massive. But the emotion is still there, people that are gone. So, you know, I really feel like this lecture series is an individual thing, that each one of us is here, we're gaining from it individually. I know I'm speaking only for myself, I've learned about me and I'm growing because of it. And I reiterate, I don't feel the instructors need to apologize for the way they presented things, for the philosophy that they used, or for the information that they gave us, because we're all going to take it accordingly. That's all I have to say.
I'm not so sure that we want or need to apologize. I think what we need is clarification. We need to clarify, because many things can be very easily misunderstood because people come from different walks of life and also are tainted with a different type of it. So they have this sort of colored glasses and therefore interpret what we say in a different way. And in order to somehow ensure that people understand what we really mean to say, we like to be clear as we possibly can, so that we are understood properly and understood in a way as we meant to be understood.
Back there, all the way in the rear?
Right.
Along the same lines of the gentleman who just spoke, I found the so-called trivialization of the Holocaust very useful. I didn't expect, I have no religious reason to be here or family history, but I found that I, on a personal level, related to certain characteristics, certain civilizations that you spoke of, your experiences, Professor Steiner, and also a woman was speaking of the difficulties of being a German and wanting to help Jews by hiding or in any other way, and I could relate to those difficulties and I could identify with them, and I think that is extremely significant for me because it's an emotive class and it's difficult, and I think that if it wasn't difficult, it wouldn't be valuable, and that it's causing me, like this gentleman, to question myself and to ask serious and deep questions what would I do, and how would I have handled the situation differently? And furthermore, how can I respond in such a way to prevent a Holocaust from occurring, or at least not to participate in the advance and the perpetration of Holocausts around the world?
Well, I think you've expressed your sentiment exceedingly well. And what it really boils down to, that we just, it's difficult to relate experience. It's easier to relate, or even that is quite difficult to relate thoughts and us. But it's very difficult to relate experience. So that's why we've had some of the movies here, these documentaries, in order to substitute the experiences which fortunately you hopefully will never have. But in order not to have them, we need to guard very carefully against the possibility that if we are not vigilant and if we don't understand what brings about something like the Holocaust, chances are that it may recur, and that is something which we need to avoid. And that's why we are really here. We are here in order to talk about what we have learned and what can be and what needs to be learned in order to prevent anything which will be even worse, possibly, than what happened during World War II.
There's a question down here.
Kathy, Kathy?
Well, mine wasn't really dealing with my feelings about the class, but I've had a question ever since, I think the second week when somebody brought up, I never realized that the American military and the president, et cetera, whoever, knew about the concentration camps to such a degree. And I've just been curious, to what extent did the average serviceman or army person, whatever, over there, American soldier, know about the concentration camps? And like when they burst upon the concentration camps and freed them, what was their knowledge? Did they know that they existed? The general, private, or whatever?
No, they didn't. They didn't know very much, although there were some things which were written in the papers. But somehow things which are unbelievable are not registered properly. And yes, there are quite a few things written about them, nothing specific enough. Now let me just tell you one thing which is interesting. Slave labor camps which produced ammunition or war-related materials were raided periodically, but destruction camps and concentration camps remained untouched. So some of you who have read my account will remember that the slave labor camp I spent quite some time in was producing synthetic gasoline. And that was raided all the time. They built it up. We built it up, the slave laborers. And the very moment it was built up, then Allied bombers came just to destroy it again. And we just went again, we built it up, and then they came again. So these things were bombed. But not because they wanted to support the people who were slave laborers in it, but simply because it was producing war material which was a threat to the Allies. Now, the leading people in the Pentagon and elsewhere, of course, had the maps which were available, the air photograph, but that didn't move them to do something systematic which would have prevented the transportation of people into destruction camps. That was not being done for reasons which are very interesting to explore, and we have some answers for that because they're not of military strategic interest to them.
This is directed to Dr. Steiner and also to we had one woman who came in and told about how she had gone back to her home and they said this is no longer your home. And I was wondering, what exactly did Germany do at this point? Did all of a sudden they just have a huge homeless rate when all these people came out? Or was there money supplied to you that said, here, you can build up your life? Or, what exactly happened? Because we hear up to this point of we weren't let back our homes, but, you know, did mass construction take place? I mean,
Well, that depends where it was. For example, when I came back home, the place in which we used to live, which was pretty much in the center of the city of Prague, there was an air raid, you know, just 1 or 2 air raids, very infrequent, because they didn't go to Prague to destroy. Prague was not a strategic center at all. It was of very little interest to them. But now I found out that these 2 air raids were actually mistakes, and one of my fellow students back at the University of Missouri, which I attended in the 50s, mid-50s, told me that, yes, I was one of the pilots. We thought it was Dresden. And Dresden, yeah, Germany, which is, by the way, not very far from Prague. You know, it's actually, in terms of our distance, it's very close. So I hope to go back to my apartment, which was occupied by a Nazi, to be sure, as I found out later on, only to see that it was destroyed. So I went back to the railway station where I had arrived to begin with, and slept the night over until I could find some friends or people who would give me a roof over the head, a temporary roof over the head. Well, and the government did very little for us. And one thing which was said during the lecture series, we were not received with open arms because we are viewed as a burden. And not only that, and that has not been mentioned at all, and I'll tell you that some of the things. Now, people who had some inkling that they would be deported into concentration camps, ghettos, and what have you, had non-Jewish friends or relatives who were not as Jewish as they were, what have you, know. And gave them some of their valuables, because otherwise it would have been confiscated by the Nazis and sold and all that, or just people would have just taken that who were Nazi dignitaries. Goering was very good at it, by the way. And so we did the same, and we gave a lot of valuable stuff to friends who said, well, we'll keep it until the time you return. And then I went back to some of these people, and some gave it back to me, and to the family, I should say, father and I. And some other ones said, well, if we had known that you come back, we wouldn't have taken the things. And so this was not just a singular incident. You know, that happened to quite a number of people, and they refused to return it. So we were not received with open arms, and very little help to people who came back. But again, and I'd like to stress that differed from country to country. Now, in Poland, for example, people who survived and again went to some sort of a place to live, which was primarily Jewish and all that, so they staged a pogrom against those survivors who had survived. The Poles did, and decimated and virtually wiped out that particular place. In Germany, for example, German Jews were treated relatively in a way where they rendered more support. Austria, for example, gave virtually none whatsoever, still doesn't. So the Germans were relatively generous. And people who came back, Jews who came back to Germany at that time, really could, American and English and all that, had a relatively much better time in Europe than under the Japanese. So the Japanese prisoner of war camps were just absolutely deadly in comparison to some of the... And we've interviewed some people who were prisoners of war, including Jewish American GIs, and they said mistreated at all. The few, of course, to what extent that is representative, I hasten to say I don't know, because we couldn't get hold of that many, or I couldn't, because I'm doing this sort of research out of interest. But that needs to be said, that, let me just put it, they're survivable.
John, how about
And there is a very important point, that because it was in other concentration camps.
On that same question, I was just going to say that in fact the racism of the Nazis actually played in favor of prisoners of war who came from countries that the Nazis recognized as being racially equal, which was to say Nordic countries, Great Britain in particular, and soldiers from the United States, obviously. Value, if you will, that the Nazis gave to the prisoners of war.
Well, there was one thing that quite a number of Russian prisoners of war tried to escape because of the bad treatment. When they were caught, they were sent to concentration camps, if not shot on the spot. So in Dachau, for example, you had a number of Russian prisoners of war who had escaped and caught again, and they were sent to Dachau, for example, which was their punishment. Yeah.
Before leaving the subject that that young lady brought up about the post-war treatment of the Jews, we have to also discuss the DP camps. What happened from 1945 to 48 in the establishment of the State of Israel. The Jews were stateless people, and the Allied powers put them back into concentration camps. Not like Nazi camps, but camps where they were well taken care of, got 3 meals a day, and they all wanted to go to Palestine. The British wouldn't let them in. So that's the rest of the story.
Did you find quite a bit of differentiation in the camps that were, well, the treatment, the camps were run by the Luftwaffe, the camps were run by the Wehrmacht, versus were any of the camps run by us?
Not as far as I know, that none of the camps were run by the SS. And I'm not aware, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it didn't exist. I'm not aware of any sort of different treatment, either run by most of them were run by the Wehrmacht.
You mean the POW?
The POW camps. So the SS did not really come into the picture very much there.
But when an airman was shot down, wasn't he sent to a Luftwaffe camp?
Depends who picked him up. Depends who picked him up.
Just something to elaborate real quick here. I don't know a lot about the subject, but they were divided up. There's all the British pilots, American pilots, they were sent to the Luftwaffe POW camps. As far as the foot soldiers, I'm not so sure about how those were divided. But they did sent to a different POW camp.
May I ask one more? Why the tremendous anti-Semitism among the Poles? I remember seeing something in the Shoah where they would talk, the Poles would talk, they would have the Jews' homes after the extermination camps, and they talked about that they wouldn't mingle with the Poles, the Jewish people, and the Jewish girl home when our girls would have to work, and they were caught. You know, this was prevalent, this tremendous anti-Semitism, even to this day among the Polish people. I wonder why.
Well, we've discussed it before you came, at the beginning, extensively. And very much has to do with the tradition there, and also with the type of belief which prevailed among the Catholics. And a combination of both, the cultural anti-Semitism which was fueled by the church. Now, I remember back in my school in Prague, when I went to school, I didn't go to any of the religious classes, but there was a Catholic class, and some of my fellow students made anti-Semitic remarks and about the Jews, all sorts of things, and I at that particular time had absolutely no understanding of that. I was exposed to that, and then I went back to my parents, and they made some remarks about Jews, and I never heard that before. And then my mother said, well, tell those kids who go to that religious class there at school and make anti-Semitic remarks, tell them that Jesus Christ was a Jew. And I said that to them, and the occasion arose, and then they told it to the Catholic priest who was teaching that class, and then he said, tell Steiner to wash out his mouth.
one second here. I think this is maybe too glib an explanation. I mean, I think Poland remains, to me, very much a kind of a mystery. For example, how would it be possible, and how would it be possible, for example, that Italy, which is certainly a Catholic country, the anti-Semitism really never took off like it did in Germany or anywhere else. We had here somebody else talking about Belgium the other day, being hidden by Catholic priests. So there is, there must be something more than just Catholicism. Does anybody know about that?
Yeah, well, we've talked about it just a moment ago, more or less, that there are cultural differences, and these cultural differences are reflected what people believe, and to what extent they will be prejudiced. And Johnson, you're quite right that in Italy, which of course is the seat of Catholicism, anti-Semitism was virtually non-existent. And why? That's a good question. And I don't think I have an answer for that, because you would expect, that the interpretation and the attitude of fascist party supported Mussolini. I've met one here in San Francisco, working for Neiman and Marcus.
While I was watching the film show, I was chilled by the almost lighthearted memories the Polish people had about the Jews who had disappeared. How can they chuckle about this? How can they talk about it as if, oh, well, it was just something that happened? And it's such a dreadful thing, and yet the lightheartedness when they were interviewed just has lasted with me. I've seen this program a number of times. I've got it on tape at home. And when I watch it again, the same feeling comes back to me. How could they be lighthearted about something so terrible?
There was a very interesting episode which I'd like to relate connection. When I was in Germany over some years ago, I noticed a individual just at the railway station who seemed to be helpless, and turned out that he just had come from Poland and was a communist official doing business in Germany, which was at that time fairly unusual, And so we started to talk, and I asked him questions as I like to do, because that's where you get some knowledge which you don't have. And said, well, what he was doing, and he was just a little bit tight-lipped in terms of why he was in Germany at that particular point. But then he started to talk about the communist and the communist regime and the advantages which now have developed by virtue of the fact that the communists are in charge, because they are cleaning up with the Jewish Catholicism and with the whole Mary and the Jesus, who was illegitimate bred, and all that, and started to talk about these sort of, they're just really amazing, and said, well, we are cleaning up all this Jewish Christianity, and we're going to destroy it totally. So there you had a Pole who was a communist ideologue, who said, not only the Jews need to be, and he also said something, the one thing we will not do, namely we will not do a half a job, because Hitler did half a job. How many Jews are still running around? He didn't do a real good job at all. And but we are going to clean up. And this cleaning up will include precisely the church and all this Jewish belief, which is the basis of the Catholic Church. So you had these sort of individuals also.
He's probably a very good capitalist right now in Poland. There are no communists. I've never heard of any. They all turn to be capitalists.
It's very familiar. I haven't met many back in Czechoslovakia either.
I'm wondering what lessons we've learned, whether we can take something positive with us I was very disturbed about this Harris adventure, particularly after hearing that we have a gas chamber in Marin County, that regardless even of the death penalty, I'm listening to the airwaves and people's off with their head, and that solves the problem. I mean, what is happening? It feels to me as though World War II unleashed Pandora's box. We've lost all consciousness of respect for humanity.
Well, I couldn't agree more with you. What we need to do is just find the facts and understand as much as can be understood and behave accordingly. And I've had some experience which I'm not likely to forget in one of my classes today, where I met only with, total misunderstanding of the whole situation, and these people are, supposed to have developed some expertise, and some of the answers I got there are just really frightening. And I said, well, what have they learned? What are we, in a position to learn if being taught and if we reflect on things? And it is a very rocky road, but we just simply can't afford to give up. We have to continue and struggle and do whatever we can in order to understand what can be understood and push forward and act accordingly, because it's not just that we understand something, which is step number one, but we also have to act accordingly, which is step number two, because if we just understand and don't act in a way that we understand it, don't have the profiling courage to do things which may not be popular, then nothing is going to be changed.
I would underscore that, and I would urge everyone here to not just inform yourself about the Holocaust and about tendencies in the same direction that we see evidence of in our own society and others, but make a program out of it. Dr. Steiner says act. The action is the key. If we don't act, then we can be certain that we will have no effect on what happens, and another Holocaust may. If we do act, we should be sure that our actions take a form that we know is calculated to prevent Holocausts. What I would urge you to do, therefore, is to start making lists. What are the things that you need to do, and then that we need to do, so that, we can have some political effect too. Not, it won't all, just doing it by yourself isn't enough. It's the sine qua non. It's what you've got to do first. But you've got to get it to where it's a group phenomenon as well as just an individual phenomenon. But start specifying things. I can, for whatever it may be worth, give you the benefit of some of the lists that I've made. I don't have right now, I don't want to start quoting from memory, but there are, I've sat down and thought to myself, what would I have to do if I had control of things to assure that Holocausts wouldn't happen in the future? First thing I came up with is that I can't assure it. I think there's that fact that we're going to have to accept. There is no certainty about it. Okay, well, given that existential uncertainty, what do we do next? We do the things that appear to be best calculated to preventing this kind of development. And my answers will be yours. And why don't we make lists and share them with each other and learn from each other? Apply your own best thinking to it, and then don't stop there. Act on what you have put on the list. One of the things that I would put on my list is reach out to people whom you don't understand, to people who are different from you in one way or another, to people who come from a different background. I mean, by reaching out, I mean talking to them and listening to them. Something about this 2 weeks ago. We have to hear each other's pain. If everyone would listen to each other's pain, I doubt very much that we would kill each other. But we have to reach out first, because if we don't reach out, we will be manipulated by people who don't want us to. And they will lead us or force us in one way or another to take violent action against people who are different or who represent in some way a threat to interests of the people who are controlling our actions. We have to control our own. And so I urge you, I challenge you to come up with ideas that you will then put into action. And don't neglect the action part of it. It's absolutely crucial. Lynn?
I appreciate your saying that. I appreciate the woman's pain who opened this discussion today. It's important to recognize, it's important to hear And it means that I, sitting here, I who have no background in Jewish religion, I who have divorced myself from my Catholic religion, and I who sit here without a God, but I care. And what I have to do is I have to ask myself, what next? I can't just rehash the past. And so the purpose of this one person who is being obliterated today, because there isn't just one people who are being obliterated today, it's all over the globe. The part that really frightens me is how do we get control? We've heard these things being said about how the government hid information from us during World War II, and that when our country was not a major power, it was becoming a major power. It was still getting there. It wasn't until after World War II that we really established ourselves as a major world power. And if we had that kind of control over us at that time, I mean, it just baffles me what might be happening right now that we don't know about right now. This frightens me. This frightens me tremendously. How do we get that? How do we get control? How can we sit here individually and say that we assume our responsibilities for the past and we want to be responsible for the future when we have all of these things on top of us saying, or even hiding it from us, that we can't do it. I mean, this is where I'm at. How can I make a list about it?
But how can you be so sure that if you were in control, nobody else would be in danger? How could you be sure of that?
I couldn't.
Right.
But
right.
That doesn't mean that I don't want something better for the world.
No, I think what's very, what's very important, there are really two major reactions, I think, to what if something goes wrong in the country, something goes wrong with the economy, something goes wrong, whatever. It's always possible to look like where are the ones who did it. And so then you get to a whole scapegoating phenomenon where you just look for somebody who did this awful thing. The much more difficult thing is really basically to see, like, what about ourselves? What about the things that we? What about the things? I find it so very fantastic. We talk about, anti-Semitism. I teach in a psychology department. I mean, psychology as a science is itself science. I mean, quote, whatever. As a discipline, whatever. But I mean, but you look at it, you see that what is excised from this so-called science of human beings is our whole history of the Judaic branch. It's the only thing that is really tolerable for to talk about. The only thing that's really fashionable and interesting and academic to talk about in psychology is when you talk about Greeks or Romans. But you cannot talk. You cannot really illustrate a point by pointing to Genesis. People say, must be some kind of religious nut, and then you get a whole bunch of stuff about, backwoods, rednecks, and all sorts of crazy people know about those things. So I mean, there is a lot of that kind of stuff just going on in our own classrooms and among ourselves. I mean, let's look at that rather than say like we are going to find microscopes and special glasses and look for who's the enemy. I mean, we are it.
I was very saddened this morning. They put Harris away like this, and I thought to myself, surely be the Roman Catholics or the Lutherans or something else later on, but I thought the people, no, we're just, we put down the Germans and everything, and I'm looking at, what we're capable of, and just this morning, very timely in our own state, and there's a bloodlust out there. They just want more, but yet they can always come back to the Mosaic law again, an eye for an eye, which is very Judaic. So maybe to address that.
Well, I like to address it because what it does really mean in the proper translation, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, it means restitution and not retribution. And so the entire law, which we actually have internalized, which prevails in the Western world for all practical purposes, is based on a misunderstanding, on a bad translation. So that we have the law of retribution or the law of restitution. And I've tried to explain it to my students, but I don't think I've made any headway. I don't think they've understood that, that is something they've been socialized. We've all been socialized in that. And believing that this is proper, but it's based on a misinterpretation, poor translation.
Okay. I'm going to address you as an expert. I'm the only expert in this room, and I don't mind saying it. I am a licensed euthanasia person. I have a state license to perform euthanasia, and I have 30 years' experience. I'm a veterinarian. And you have never heard a word from the veterinary profession on what euthanasia means, painless death.
But I think what he did was cruel and barbaric as well. So it should be that way. He should die. He should have died 14 years ago, some other way. If not the gas chamber, then
I think
shot.
society should be.
Should have been shot.
That's what they tried to convince the Jews of doing that too. That was part of the German propaganda. They were cruel.
Well, the question is, what does it solve? So we're going to kill each other until no one is going to be left, right?